Welcome to the debate. So, what do a 19th century textile mill worker and a 2026 software engineer have in common?
Well, I'd say probably more than you might think.
Right, because right now there are master's degree holding coders practically sweating over their job security. Meanwhile, high school graduates with, welding certifications are basically writing their own paychecks.
Yeah, it's wild to see.
It really is. So today, we're asking a pretty controversial question. Has the technological script officially flipped? Are we witnessing a historical inversion where the current wave of technological disruption, specifically generative and agentic AI, is hitting highly educated knowledge workers harder than blue-collar physical laborers?
It's the defining question of our time, really.
Exactly. Now, I approach this issue mostly through the lens of labor data and historical precedent. I'm arguing that AI is simply the latest chapter in a long history of skill-biased technological change. So I believe this wave ultimately transforms rather than uniquely penalizes knowledge work.
And I argue that AI represents a fundamental paradigm shift that uniquely targets cognitive labor. From my perspective in the tech sector, we are seeing an unprecedented displacement of white-collar workers. And at the same time, it's triggering a massive boom in blue-collar trades to build the physical infrastructure that makes AI even possible.
Let's start by zooming out a bit, because to really understand the panic of a software engineer today, we actually need to look backward.
Right, to the original industrial waves.
Yes, exactly. When we analyze the broad sweep of economic history, the disruption we're seeing right now, it isn't an anomaly. It's a textbook continuation of what the economist Joseph Schumpeter famously called creative destruction.
Right. The whole concept that the new economy basically has to burn down the old one in order to grow.
Precisely. If we apply Carlota Perez's framework of technological revolutions, starting with the Industrial Revolution back in the 1770s, then moving through the age of steam, the age of steel, and so on, we see a really highly predictable pattern.
Which is that the machine comes for the manual labor first.
Exactly. Every single major technological revolution replaces a specific type of human labor with machinery. But, in doing so, it forces a structural shift and creates vast new operational and management classes.
Do the work of 50 people, right?
Right, but look at the jobs it created.
Sure, it created the factory floor manager, the maintenance mechanic, the logistics coordinator. But the mechanisms of displacement back then were intensely physical. You were replacing human muscle and manual dexterity with iron gears and steam.
True. The displacement was physical, but the economic mechanism underneath it, the actual why of the labor shift, is what the Upjohn Research Institute calls skill-biased technological change.
Break that down for the listener. What does skill-biased actually mean in practice?
Well, it basically means that technology inherently plays favorites. Throughout the 20th century, as we introduced advanced manufacturing technologies, things like computer numerically controlled machines or flexible manufacturing systems, those technologies were inherently biased toward higher education.
Because they required more training to operate.
Yes, they eliminated the low-skill, repetitive manual positions on the assembly line, absolutely, but they disproportionately rewarded highly educated workers.
Because someone had to program the CNC machine.
Right. Those advanced machines were integrative. They connected the manufacturing floor directly to marketing data and R&D. And to manage that really complex web, you needed humans who understood abstract, complex systems.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, so historically, technology has always pulled the workforce upward toward higher cognitive demands. It doesn't just permanently eliminate the middle class. It forces a structural shift in what skills are actually valued. My point is, knowledge work isn't dying. It's just shifting its focus, like it always does.
Well, I come at it from a different way. I acknowledge that historical pattern, absolutely. But I believe the script has officially flipped today.
How so?
Think about the period from the 1950s through the 2000s, the era of computerization and the internet. Software workers essentially functioned as the architects of that skill-biased change you're talking about. They were the ones building the tools that automated other people's jobs.
Yeah, they were very securely on the winning side of that skill bias.
Precisely. They were untouchable. For decades, highly educated cognitive workers felt totally invincible. I mean, a software developer in 2015 was literally writing the code that displaced the travel agent, the factory line worker, the administrative assistant.
But that just proves my point. The cognitive work was valued over the routine manual work.
But Gen AI and now agentic AI represent something entirely new in the history of human technology. This is the first time a machine is successfully mimicking reasoning, complex coding, and creative content generation. We aren't just talking about autocomplete anymore.
You're talking about autonomous execution.
Exactly. Agentic AI doesn't just retrieve information. It makes autonomous decisions. It plans multi-step workflows, and it executes tasks without human prompting. We are seeing software engineers experiencing the exact same existential anxiety and skill obsolescence fears today that auto workers felt in the 1980s. The cognitive fortress has been breached.
That's a really interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. You're looking at the raw capability of the technology and assuming a one-to-one replacement of the worker.
Because in many cases it is.
Well, you see an AI write a Python script and assume the Python developer is just fired. But historically, when a task becomes automated, the human doesn't just vanish into thin air. Their role elevates to manage the automation.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. And it comes down to who is actually getting hit the hardest in the real economy today. Have you looked at the Center for Strategic and International Studies AI Action Plan data?
I'm familiar with it, yes.
The contrast in the current labor market is staggering. To build the physical infrastructure needed to power America's AI future, we're talking about adding 50 gigawatts of new data center capacity by 2030. The U.S. faces a massive critical shortage of physical labor. They project a need for over 140,000 new incremental skilled trades positions.
Wait, 140,000 strictly for AI infrastructure?
Exactly, just for the data centers and the power grid upgrades to support them. And we aren't just talking about your standard residential electricians who, wire a suburban home. We're talking about workers who can handle high-density server racks drawing 40 to 50 kilowatts each. We need thousands of pipe fitters who can fabricate sophisticated liquid cooling systems.
Right, because the servers run way too hot for standard air conditioning.
Yeah, AI computational workloads generate heat densities approaching industrial furnaces. If you don't have literal plumbing running liquid cooling directly through the server racks, the whole system just melts down.
So it's a massive hardware problem.
It is. So you have this massive blue-collar boom, a desperate need for heavy equipment operators, pipe fitters, welders. Meanwhile, the cognitive workers, the lawyers, the marketing professionals, the junior software devs, they are facing intense algorithmic management stress.
Let's define that term for the listeners. What does algorithmic management stress actually look like for someone sitting at a desk on a Tuesday afternoon?
Well, research from the International Social Sciences and Education Journal details this perfectly. Imagine you're a junior lawyer. You don't just have a human partner assigning you work anymore. You have an AI monitoring your document review speed, correcting your drafts in real time, and essentially pacing your cognitive output the exact same way a conveyor belt paces a factory worker.
Wow, so the pacing is fully automated.
Yes, and that is causing deep identity threats among white-collar workers. Their hard-earned cognitive expertise is being replicated by machines, leading to reduced autonomy and severe job insecurity. The physical workers are the new elite, and the cognitive workers are the new assembly line.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because, frankly, you're comparing the construction phase of a new technology to the operational reality of the technology itself.
What do you mean?
Yes, building the data centers requires incredible amounts of physical labor, just like laying the transatlantic telegraph wires did in the 1800s. But let's look at the cognitive workers themselves. I want to point to the recent Citi report on agentic AI and what they call the transition to the do-it-for-me economy.
Okay.
The data actually does not show cognitive workers being wholesale replaced on this digital assembly line. It shows them being augmented. But augmented is so often just corporate speak for having a machine do 80% of your job until management realizes they only need 20% of the staff.
I hear that. But look at the mechanism of how agentic AI is actually being deployed. The Citi report highlights a really fascinating shift. Basically, the IT department of every company is essentially going to become the HR department for AI agents.
The HR department for software.
Think about what that means. Today, IT manages static software. Tomorrow, they will maintain, nurture, onboard, and improve a fleet of digital agents. The human software engineer doesn't disappear. They transition from writing boilerplate code to orchestrating complex AI workflows. Think of it like the electric motor in a 19th century factory.
How so? Well, when the electric loader arrived, it didn't replace the factory owner or the floor manager. It replaced the massive central steam engine. AI is replacing the central steam engine of routine cognitive tasks, all that repetitive mental lifting. But humans must still direct the overall system, define the parameters, and manage all the edge cases. The developer just becomes the manager of a digital workforce.
That is a compelling argument, I'll admit, but have you considered the sheer speed of this transition? Your 19th century factory analogy highlights my exact concern here.
You mean the timeline?
Yes. The transition from steam to electricity, or from an agrarian society to an industrial one, took decades. It allowed for generational workforce adjustment. The father worked in the field, the son worked in the factory. What we are seeing with AI is happening in a matter of years, sometimes literally months.
You think the velocity prevents that management transition?
Absolutely. Look at autonomous vehicles as a proxy for how fast AI scales in the physical world. Waymo launched completely without human drivers in San Francisco in August 2023. Within just 15 months, they captured 22% of the entire rideshare market in the city.
That is remarkably fast, yes.
Just picture that. Within a year and a half, nearly a quarter of all rides in a major metropolitan area suddenly had no human behind the wheel. When digital barriers are removed, AI scales at a velocity that human retraining simply cannot match. You can't turn a displaced copywriter into a digital workflow architect in 15 months.
Speed of adoption is certainly accelerating, I grant you that. But I think you're vastly underestimating the friction of the real world. The real-world integration of technology into complex human systems is incredibly messy.
Messy how?
It carries massive capital costs and faces immense organizational inertia. Furthermore, there is what the Great Retraining research calls the bias trap.
You mean the unreliability of the data these systems produce? The hallucinations?
Exactly. AI recruitment systems, operational systems, and decision-making tools frequently struggle to evaluate non-traditional data or outliers accurately. Because of this inherent operational friction, we are actually seeing the immediate implementation of mandatory human oversight.
Like regulatory oversight?
Yes. Look at the European Union's AI Act. It requires strict human-in-the-loop oversight for high-risk AI applications. If a bank uses an AI to evaluate loan applications, the AI might process the data in 10 seconds, sure. But the liability for a discriminatory or catastrophic financial decision still rests with a human executive.
Right.
This regulatory and liability friction inherently slows down the total automation of white-collar work. You just cannot automate fiduciary duty.
Sure, but the psychological toll of that specific friction is devastating. Going back to the ISSJ research on employee well-being, they point out that this isn't just about whether you technically keep your job. It's about the nature of the work you're left doing.
The de-skilling argument.
Yeah, unlike physical automation, which took away dangerous or backbreaking tasks. I mean, nobody misses hand cranking a massive loom. Generative AI creates what researchers termed existential anxiety among mid-career professionals.
Because it targets what they're most proud of. Their intellect.
Exactly. Imagine spending 20 years mastering the nuances of financial analysis or contract law, only to have a machine do it instantly. And your job, as you pointed out with the liability friction, is reduced to just checking the machine's work for errors.
It is a shift in daily tasks, yes.
It hollows out the professional identity of the knowledge worker. We're asking people to engage in perpetual education, basically constantly running on a treadmill just to stay relevant, as these AI management roles evolve underneath them at breakneck speed.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on that professional identity. Throughout history, the definition of what constitutes valuable work changes.
How do you mean?
Well, a mathematician in the 1940s was literally a person who did arithmetic all day. The electronic calculator eliminated that task entirely. But it didn't eliminate mathematicians, right? It freed them from the drudgery of long divisions so they could do higher-level theoretical work.
But this isn't just a calculator.
No, but I maintain that empirical data suggests we are entering an economy where knowledge workers transition to become managers of AI resources. They will be steering the ship rather than rowing it, focusing on strategy rather than execution. It's a bumpy transition? Absolutely. But the fundamental economic value of human judgment remains intact.
And I maintain that you're underestimating the profound systemic disruption of cognitive automation. When an AI can not only row the ship, but, read the stars, interpret the weather, and chart the course autonomously, the human is just a passenger. The most secure, highest-paying jobs of the next decade might very well be the ones requiring steel-toed boots, a welding torch, and a deep understanding of thermodynamics.
Well, we've explored quite a bit of ground today. It seems we both agree on one critical point, however. The current educational and retraining infrastructure is dangerously inadequate for the labor market that's coming.
Oh, absolutely. The traditional model of front-loading your education in your 20s, getting a degree, and then just relying on those specific skills for a 40-year career, that is completely dead.
Right. Both of our perspectives really point to the necessity of proactive, lifelong learning models. We both looked closely at Singapore's Skills Future Initiative as a potential blueprint.
Yeah, it's a fascinating program. They provide citizens with continuous funding and flexible options to update their skills throughout their lives. So, whether you're a pipe fitter needing to adapt to high-density liquid cooling systems, or a software developer transitioning to AI auditing and workflow management, continuous funded retraining is really the only viable path forward.
We agree that traditional education is dead, sure. But I don't think throwing a displaced coder into a, lifelong learning prompt engineering seminar saves them when the AI learns to prompt itself next year. The disruption to software workers is going to be far more visceral than a simple retraining grant can fix. Well, as we conclude, instead of declaring a definitive winner today, let's look to the horizon. I'd like your one-sentence prediction for the labor market in the year 2035 based on our discussion today.
All right. In 2035, the traditional college degree will be a secondary credential compared to a proven track record of successfully collaborating with and auditing autonomous AI systems.
Interesting. And my prediction is that by 2035, managing digital labor will just be the standard entry-level knowledge worker job, while human-to-human physical services will command the absolute highest premium in the market.
We'll certainly have to wait and see whose data proves out over the next decade.
Indeed. We started today by asking what a 19th century textile mill worker and a 2026 software engineer have in common. They both woke up one day to find that the machine could weave the fabric of their daily work faster than they ever could. We leave it to you, the listener, to decide if that machine is a tool to be wielded or a tide that will sweep us away. There is much more to explore in the economic data and historical archives. Thank you for joining us.